For me, the report really confirmed a lot of things that we at BioCarbon are seeing in the market. For example, in our conversations with buyers in the US, we've really noticed a trend of focusing on things like supply chain management in the market and other issues in sustainability like water management. And not as much conversation in the US market anyway today about offsets. So we find a lot more activity in offsets still in the European market, but a lot of the European sustainability officers, while they're also focusing on other trends in sustainability, like I mentioned, supply chain management, that is really the focus of activity in the US rather than offsets. That's one reaction I had to it. And of course, there are a lot of results in the report to speak about. For example, the focus on existing buyers rather than new buyers. The engagement, I thought, of the public sector in the offset market is a really important thing. In one sense, it seems like a bad thing to me because it means that there's relatively less private sector engagement. But in another sense, it makes perfect sense that the public sector is engaged in the market because it's really at a time when certain aspects of the market, particularly in landscape protection, needs to have the public sector engagement. So that sort of thing that I think you touched on in the report makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there are a couple of things. One, I think, as the comment I made at the panel, is that I think we as an industry really have to spend more time essentially remaking the argument on the value of offsets. Unfortunately, so much attention has drifted to other topics in climate mitigation in general, other topics in sustainability, that people have drifted away from focusing on the value of offsets. And I think we've got to make the case, one, that offsets play a critical role in a portfolio of activity that firms, and for that matter, other organizations and entities take to deal with the climate problem. The second is, at one time we had thought that there ought to be growth in the voluntary buy side in other regions, in Asia, in Oceania, in Latin America, even in more developing countries. We haven't seen that, honestly, and I know in your report I was interested to see, for example, that there was a growth in buyers in Latin America, and that was exciting for us to see. We've reached out quite a bit to buyers in, for example, Asia, and we haven't seen as much activity in voluntary buying, and that's been surprising and disappointing, but there ought to be growth opportunities in other regions. Well, I guess the overall comment that I would make on those particular project types is, on forestry, I think the overriding dynamic is that there's simply a lot of supply in the market. So I think a lot of firms recognize that projects like ours are great projects, community benefits, great conservation benefit, but there's a lot of supply out there, even from lesser projects, and at the end of the day, firms that are price sensitive would rather buy from a project that may not be as high a quality as some of the projects that we pursue, but it's still forest carbon, whatever standard they may use. So it's difficult to deal with that supply and that sort of price pressure. On the cook stove project, I have been surprised at how much quality demand there has been. So we've been successful in selling the cook stove projects onto European sovereign buyers, and there's strong demand for good projects from least developed countries for projects like that. Yeah, I haven't seen as much of an issue with price driving volumetric demand, because so much of that activity, at least from our point of view, is driven by the sovereign buyers who are essentially fine to pay a slightly higher price than, of course, that they could get in cheaper CER projects today. But there hasn't been as much elasticity, if you will, between the price and the volume for those projects, at least not in my experience for what we've done. I think that we're going to see a continuation of current trends. I think we'll probably see additional public sector engagement in these areas. Hopefully that will spur sufficient fundamental market development that corporates will be more inclined and more excited about getting engaged in the future. I think we're going to continue to see a growth in sustainability work by corporates, private sector firms. Now, again, our challenge as an industry is to get them refocused on voluntary offsetting.